Talking Giants YouTube, what is up? My name is Justin Penik, and as we all know, Dave Gettleman today, he is out of the building. He is retired, he is fired, whatever word you want to use, I don't really care. He's out of the building, and that's the most important thing. So throughout the day, there's been a flurry of names that have already been circulated as they are going to be interviewing for the vacant Giants GM job. I'm putting on the screen right now the names that I know as I'm editing the video. Probably as you're watching the video, maybe 2-3 names have already been added, but this is what I know so far, just in case you're a little bit behind. Kevin Abrams was the first one to come out. Yeesh, not really exciting, not really the guy that we want, but the second guy that was broke by Adam Schefter, the second guy is assistant GM Joe Schoen, and that is what the video you are watching, that's what it is going to be about today. A little note on Joe Schoen. He's been talking with the Giants for a few months. He has not been formally interviewed. I think that is going to happen, or maybe it already did happen. But since Dave Gettleman has been still sitting GM for the Giants, they didn't formally interview him during the season, but they have been talking with him. And that is something that I did hear. And I usually am not a guy for sources, but pretty good authority. And don't quote me, but they have been talking during the season, and that's why it doesn't really surprise me that he was the second name to come out today that the Giants are going to be interviewing him. So I already have 8 pages of notes on assistant GM of the Buffalo Bills, Joe Schoen. I already have my 8 pages of notes because I knew that the Giants have been talking to him, and I knew that the Giants like him, and also he is my realistic favorite for the Giants GM job as of right now. So I have a lot of notes. I have some thoughts. I'm going to give you his background, and then we're also going to talk about some quotes of what his philosophy is and how he approaches some things like free agency, the draft, working with others, the cap, etc., etc. So we're going to talk about all that in this little brief look at Giants GM candidate Joe Schoen. So Joe Schoen, his NFL career started in the year 2001. He was a scouting assistant with the Carolina Panthers, and then from there, the Panthers promoted him to combine scout in 2002, and then to an area scout for the next 5 seasons. So in total, he spent 7 years with the Carolina Panthers. Important to note, current GM for the Buffalo Bills, Brandon Beane, was the guy who hired Joe Schoen to the Carolina Panthers in the early 2000s. So really, Joe Schoen and Brandon Beane, they have a 21, 22-year relationship now of friendship and then also working in football. But eventually, Joe Schoen is going to be leaving the Carolina Panthers, and he's going to be going to the Miami Dolphins, and Jeff Ireland, and guess who? Bill Parecells, when he was working in the front office, hired him in the year 2008. They hired Schoen as a national scout with the Dolphins. Here is what Bill Parecells had to say about Joe Schoen. I was impressed with Joe because he was a sharp guy, and he has a good thought process when it comes to evaluating players. Joe Schoen eventually moves up the ladder a little bit with the Dolphins organization. He went from a national scout to an assistant college director, and then he leapfrogged a position to director of player personnel in 2014 when Dennis Hickey took over as GM. So he spent 2014 to 2016 with the Miami Dolphins as the director of player personnel. There were a couple years where he worked with Bill Parecells, which that's important. Not necessarily Bill Parecells as a head coach, but Bill Parecells, the executive. But he was groomed by Parecells for a couple years. That's really, really cool, really, really neat. And then from there, he joins Brandon Beane with the Buffalo Bills as the assistant GM in 2017. Brandon Beane takes over the main GM job in 2017, and from there, the Bills have had some success, and those two have been a pretty good tandem. So let's talk about Joe Schoen's philosophy and maybe his approach to some situations. So he was asked in an article to define his role, and I want to skip to the second paragraph. You can read the first paragraph and pause the video if you want. But this is the most important aspect of looking at Joe Schoen. This is what entices me the most about him. A lot of my background is the personnel. So watching film, pro, college, draft prospects, free agency, the waiver wire, that's a majority of my day. But when we got to the Bills, we had to hire a scouting staff. We didn't have an analytics department. We didn't have a scouting system. So early on, Brandon and I did a lot of that together. The grading scale is pretty simple, 7.0 for a first rounder, la-di-la-di-la-di-la-la. What the Giants need right now is a total rebuild, right? That's what the Giants need. That's what we've been saying. And the fact that when Joe Schoen and Brandon Beane, they built it together. It wasn't just Joe Schoen by himself, but they built it together. The Giants need a different way of scouting. They need to get Chris Pettit out of here. They need to get Kevin Abrams out of here. They need to get Chris Mayer out of here. They need to get Tim McDonald out of here. Everything that they've done has been broken. And the fact that Joe Schoen has experience of building up a department plus 20-some years of experience in pro personnel and scouting anyway, that really, really entices me. Do it, Joe Schoen. Tear it down, build it back up, because he has experience doing it. So, what's your philosophy when it comes to scouting players? Coach Parecells told me one time, coaches are going to come and go, so you better find out what type of players you like and go get those type of players. Because we may have success with Brian Dabble or Leslie Frazier when they're coordinators here, but if they had a certain type of player that they liked that only fit their scheme and then they leave, now you've got this player who is pigeonholed into that scheme. It's the versatility you're looking for. Like, okay, we're a press team. Well, I want corners that could play press and off. It's an organizational system with Sean and Brandon being at the top, and then you know the communication is great within our building in terms of what they're looking for, and it helps us scouts when those guys hit the road. Hey, we're looking for XYZ, and now we throw in the analytics. Little nice throw-in line there of, hey, we throw in the analytics about how we can evaluate players and how we can use that in scouting. I love that. I love that versatility. It's something that Joe Judge preached in the beginning of his time here when we actually liked him. Square pegs, round holes. He's preaching that as an assistant GM. That's pretty cool. What does the approach to the draft look like? I think Brandon and I are aligned in that we both believe in the draft and building through the draft. It's kind of our Super Bowl, our chance to affect the roster moving forward, not just in 2019 when the interview was done, but hopefully into the future. We understand the task at hand and how important it is. There's not a big margin for error. Hey, just could be just GM speak, could just be executive speak, but hearing that the draft is our Super Bowl and not relying on free agency like the Giants have done, that's pretty cool, pretty neat. Do you feel a sense of pressure alongside Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott that comes with the huge responsibility of having nearly $80 in cap space? This is important because one of the critiques of the Giants in the past has been you're overspending. You're overspending and you're relying on bringing in free agents, high-priced, overpaying for free agents like Nate Solder to fix concerns and fix areas and fix positions on this franchise that need better attention. So you can see here, you have all this cap space, you want to spend it, but you want to spend it on the right guys, because I've been in places where we spend a lot of money and you bring guys in and you're patching the holes just to get through that year. Sounds a lot like the Giants. Well, we're trying to build something to sustain success, and those players that you're going to pay that type of money, everybody in the locker room is going to look around and look at what type of guys those are. So it's not just about spending the money, but we've got to get the right guy. We've got to bring on the right talent. It's got to be right for our program. Free agency is a big burden, but I think we're well prepared. I think we've done our research, targeted our guys. We'll draw a line in the sand, what we're comfortable with spending on certain players, yada, 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 which that's an approach that I like, right? Not overspending in free agency, and I don't think you've ever seen the Buffalo Bills really overspend in free agency, despite having Josh Allen for, a couple years. He was on his rookie contract. They didn't overspend in free agency, yet they still had competitive rosters that were built through the draft. So here's a quote about scouting the person, not just the player. With scouting, I've always felt we miss more on the person than we do the talent. I think that's the biggest margin for error. So that's why we're here. That's why we go and see these kids on campus. It's a relationship business. So the more contacts you have at the schools and more people you could talk to, the more they trust you, the more you trust them, et cetera, et cetera. So Joe Schoen really put an emphasis on, and there's even a video where he's visiting the University of Buffalo. He's talking to these kids. Even as assistant GM, he would do this. Does Kevin Abrams do this? Does Kevin Abrams go to college campuses and talk with people? Probably not. Joe Schoen, as assistant GM, did. He took these trips. He talks to people. Scouting, and I think, cough, cough, DeAndre Baker, huge part of scouting I can imagine is you want to get the right person in the building, not necessarily always just the right talent. Getting the right person in the building so you know, hey, this guy could be here for 4 or 5 years if we want, and then we'll go from there with extending his contract. But I want this guy to be in the building for 4 years and bring us some good value with that contract, and then we can go from there in terms of extending him. And Joe Schoen, I feel like, really does prioritize that. Does he use analytics? This is going to be the final thing that I look at. Here is my strongest tie. Like, he says that, yes, he does use it, and, it's nothing definitive, and I don't think we're ever going to prove of who uses it, who doesn't, how much do teams use it, unless they kind of come out and say it, which some teams do. But here's the biggest tie that I have to Joe Schoen does prioritize using analytics. Dr. Dennis Locke was hired by the Dolphins, while Bills assistant general manager Joe Schoen was in Miami's front office. So when Joe Schoen was in Miami, Dr. Dennis Locke was hired to work in the analytics department for the Dolphins. Then the Bills hired Dr. Dennis Locke as the team's director of football research and strategy, while Joe Schoen was the assistant GM of the Bills. So that is a move that tells me they're bringing in a guy with a PhD that works in analytics. Since Joe Schoen was in Miami, he brought that guy, Dr. Dennis Locke, to the Buffalo Bills. That is the tie that tells me, hey, that was kind of more or less a Joe Schoen decision. He knows the guy. He likes working with them. I think he does kind of use it, prioritize it, and uses it as a tool. And that is something that does entice me. All right, so that's a little look at Bills assistant GM, Joe Schoen, who could possibly be, and I kind of hope so, the Giants GM. There you go. That is a video. Hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next time. Go Big Blue. Peace.